For the 10th episode of Gaming Custom Cards, I decided on something a little different than the usual franchise representation. This archetype is based on one of the oldest Yu-Gi-Oh games ever released, Forbidden Memories. To the uninitiated, Forbidden Memories was released before the real-life trading card game became mainstream, so it has bizarre rules that set it apart. Monsters didn't need tributes to summon, effect monsters didn't exist, and cards could be fused without a polymerization. Note that I said cards in that last example, not monsters. It's possible to fuse spells and traps with other spells and traps in that game. For example, Yumi plus Mystical Moon equals Eternal Drought, apparently. This archetype is really just a series of 3 cards based on Konami's boss character, DarkNite, who is Forbidden Memory's final boss. He's also appeared in 3 other Yu-Gi-Oh games and is something of a prototype Zorg that was invented before the manga was finished. Each game depicts him as an evil card game deity with an overpowered deck of cards that most players won't have access to in a normal playthrough. Of course, this is gaming custom cards, so I have limits to how strong any cards can be on this channel.
Bruh.
Nevertheless, they should encapsulate the feeling of spamming powerful cards with ease. The first card is, of course, DarkNite himself. Despite being based on older games, he's modernized as a normal Pendulum monster, and breaks the unwritten rule about normal monsters in general. His attack and level surpasses Blue Eyes White Dragon, which is always meant to be the strongest of all normal monsters. His flavor text references this, but his stats equal Meteor Black Dragons. In Forbidden Memories, that card is the strongest monster DarkNite has in his deck. His Pendulum effect is the real bread and butter of the archetype. It makes up the whole gameplay style. Once he hits the Pendulum Zone, its player can no longer special summon most effect monsters for the rest of the game. Divine monsters and DarkNite's true form are the only exceptions, and this cannot be negated. The latter should speak for itself, but the reason divine monsters are allowed to be special summoned is a reference to Falsebound Kingdom.
What?
Since DarkNite just pulls an Egyptian god right out of nowhere. Speaking of his true form, DarkNite can just put it on the other Pendulum Zone for free. Nightmare is considered DarkNite's true form. Coincidentally, their armor main colors are red and blue, which match Pendulum scales. If DarkNite is in the other Pendulum scale, the player can trick out any number of non-effect monsters from the extra deck in place of their Pendulum Summon, so long as their combined levels are no higher than 12. In other words, the player can just drop Meteor Black Dragon or Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon on the board. Nightmare also has an effect that lets the player treat any non-effect monster as 3 tributes for any monster of the same level. For example, the player can tribute another copy of DarkNite to put an Egyptian god on the board without worrying about it hitting the graveyard during the end phase. Nightmare's monster effect references his unwillingness to just accept defeat.
One more time. One more game!
If the player is about to lose from an incoming attack, Nightmare can hit the board and end the opponent's turn right away, with a few clauses. First, everything else on the player's board gets wiped. Second, Nightmare's attack and defense becomes whichever monster in the graveyard has the highest attack. Third, the player can't do anything else except attack with Nightmare. At all. This is intentionally designed to be a last-ditch effort to win, not a boss monster. In Forbidden Memories, Nightmare's deck runs Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon as an easily summonable monster, but it has no spells and traps whatsoever. If the player can reliably get over 4500 attack, they are guaranteed to win so long as they don't do anything stupid. Since Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon is likely to have hit the board at one point, it makes sense that Nightmare can match its power. Again, this is a last-ditch card, so it has no immunities whatsoever. If the opponent takes Nightmare off the board, you lose. The last card, Seal of the Forbidden Ruins, is an unusual fusion monster that is never meant to be summoned at all. It's basically a freely accessible searcher for DarkNite that activates by revealing itself from the extra deck. It's meant to reference how early Yu-Gi-Oh! Game AI tends to cheat during gameplay, and the implications are obvious. This all but guarantees that the player will get DarkNite in the Pendulum Zone no matter how the deck is built. I do realize the implications of a 100% consistent search engine, so there are some disadvantages. It has to be revealed at the start of main phase 1, which might be hard if the opponent went first and set up a negate that can respond to it. Also, Seal needs to send a card from the hand to the graveyard to resolve properly, so a well-timed dimension shifter from the opponent forces the player to banish a card from their hand for nothing. The player is only limited to a single summon for that turn as well, so it won't be possible to trick non-effect monsters from the extra deck and tribute them for something on the same turn. Since the player only needs a single copy of the Seal in their extra deck for that guaranteed consistency, the deck can be extremely flexible on how it is built. Maybe the player wants a ton of hand traps to support their non-effect monsters as they beat down the opponent. Maybe the player wants to run Egyptian and/or Wicked Gods without losing deck consistency. Maybe the player just wants a bunch of splashable cards that are on the ban list to do whatever. The Forbidden Memories archetype allows any of this. Since this archetype is rolling only 3 cards, there's no real combo to feature here. The main strength here is flexibility, so whatever combos the player has depends on the other cards in their deck. To make up for that, I'll feature 2 sample decks this time around instead of just 1. The first makes the most of the potential that non-effect monsters have, while also being absolutely bloated with fan traps. The second takes advantage of how DarkNite summoning restriction excludes divine monsters. The first sample deck has 16 hand traps in its main deck, nearly half of it. They all speak for themselves, especially Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, and Droll and Lockbird. The Forbidden Memories engine optimally consists of 3 DarkNites, 1 Nightmare, and 1 Seal, which this deck runs. Other 3-ofs include Pot of Avarice, which is incredibly easy to use in a mass summon deck, White Elephant's Gift, which trades off any of the extra deck monsters for 2 cards, and Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi, which is an Omni Negate without a hard once per turn. 2 Flawless Perfection of the Tenyis and 1 non-spellcasting area each grant monster effect and spell immunity to all non-effect monsters respectively. Supernatural Danger Zone pops a card each time a non-effect monster is special summoned, plus it can fetch a DarkNite from the deck if it's destroyed. Keep in mind that Nightmare's unique extra deck summoning effect is not considered a fusion or synchro summon, so this card will not revive Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. A 2-to-1 triple tactics engine helps for going second, and finally, a single copy of 3 of a kind. This is normally a difficult trap to use, but Nightmare's effect easily gets all 3 Dragonists to Wicked Knights on the board to fulfill this card's condition. Speaking of which, the extra deck has mostly non-effect fusion monsters, but it also has a couple of non-effect link monsters. It's possible to summon a Meteor Black Dragon with 2 All-Veins instead of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, should White Elephant's Gift be on hand. The links exist to unclog a hand should it be filled with Pots of Avarices and White Elephant's Gifts. You just use Nightmare's unique summon to put all 3 Dragonesses and the Zombie Warrior on the board. That's 4 monsters. Use 2 as link materials for land 4 Anxious, then use it and the other 2 for Berserker of the Tenyi. That's 5 monsters in the graveyard, which can instantly be recycled to draw 2 with Pot of Avarice. The side deck has mostly Mulch armies that can grant more draws against certain decks in a go second situation. 2 more Artifact Lancias and 2 Imperial Iron Walls help against banishing decks, which is really this archetype's weakness since DarkNite can't get Nightmare back from banishment. The other 2 seals exist in case the opponent can take a card or 2 out of the extra deck and ruin this deck's perfect consistency. The second sample deck focuses on Obelisk the Tormentor. Both normal and special summoning it are very easy with this deck. The same Forbidden Memories engine exists, 3 DarkNite, 1 Nightmare, 1 Seal. Of course, it has 3 Obelisks, but it also has other 3 tribute monsters. 2 Wicked Avatars shut down opposing spells and traps for 2 turns upon summon. Remember, DarkNite only prohibits the player from special summoning most effect monsters, not normal summoning them. That brings up the 2 Beast King Barbaros, which takes full advantage of Nightmare's 3 tribute modifier to nuke the opponent's board using a single non-effect level 8 monster. Triple 3-Eyed Ghosts use up the normal summon to search out another Darknight or the Wicked Avatar. Since DarkNite himself is the only non-effect level 10 monster, it's important to get that second copy of him. Finally, Zaphion the Time Lord can wipe an opponent's back row and draw power, or grants draw power if it hits a graveyard, which I'll get to in a second. Instead of White Elephant's Gifts, their main draw engine is 3 Tokusano Shinkyojins, which can exchange the potentially bricky level 10 monsters for 2 cards. If used on a Zaphion that's already on the board, it grants 1 more card. Two other 3-ofs are Foolish Burial Goods, which are meant to mill the other, Soul Energy Max. That card can banish itself to search Obelisk and grant another normal summon. The last 3-of, the Breaking Ruin God, is Obelisk support, as are the 2 Fists of Fates. The 2-to-1 triple tactics engine is included, plus 2 Dark Ruler No Mores, a Called by the Grave, and a Terraforming for Stables. The field spell, Mound of the Bound Creator, protects all level 10 or higher monsters, even Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and the Wicked Avatar. This leads to the last card, Divine Evolution. This is mainly a win more card and is almost never competitively useful, but for this deck, it actually buffs both Obelisk and the Wicked Avatar with a plethora of bonuses. The extra deck is more or less the same as the first sample deck, but without the Link monsters. Twin-headed Thunder Dragon exists, so it and a 3-eyed Ghost can be traded with 2 Kosano. The rare fish can do so with the 2 Dragonesses as well. Really, the side deck is more interesting. It's loaded with copies of Majesty's Fiend and the 2 Vanities monsters to prohibit the opponent from special summoning or using other monster effects. The Obelisk support can easily be traded off for those, thus completely changing this deck's strategy. That means 3 Celestial Observatories replace the 2 Kusanos, plus 2 Gaianite, the Force of Earth, can be summoned and recycled for more cards as needed. And there's that third copy of Dark Ruler No More. And that's everything. I hope you enjoyed playing with them in customs. As always, feel free to let me know of your thoughts or feedback in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in more gaming custom cards.